مريا لها برقان محي ميثي شوحة لاشمخ بما مقعث وولي يقداميك تعلق دميك صلوث محي ميثي شوحة لاشمخ وركن ذنخ الواعود مطولت سوعثنا وشبي شاثا ما حيميثي شوحة لاشمخ حي لشيول
شماوة وورا وروخة قدس الألمين آمين. بيش لطلبتها مني قد يون الخنوهارة خهمزمتا كريتا بتخاري أتفالي أخونا مناخا آشور سارغون اسخريا آلت بقلتت كرهانا كورونا فيروس شونيلي من خي الزونة اللي هي بدقيمتها بيرخت نيسان ترالب إسريخال مارن جمديتا اتنو هضرة بقربية أطربريخة اتبت نهري أخ أبسكوبة شيكاغو وهو بركت مدنخت أمريكا إتت مدنخت آتوراي وأخ مدبرانا اتصيتت قدرانا إتت مدنخت آتوراي ينكي بيشاديتا بشمت أسيرة من دوي متشميلا الداها خبرة مبشمانا الشونايت أخونا آشور صالوية بخ بزبونوتن وبمخيلوتن بطلابخ النارية لها قد آوت رخمة الروخة آشور ويابل سهمة ويرتوتا جو برديسة أم كل آني كينة وزديقة وهرهادخ صالوية بخ أبوت كلبت الدية بوتيال الدية بوت بيتوت الدية بوت خزمان خورواتي ويطان الدية وبماري من كل ريشوخنها وباسيمة مريا لها بارخلوخن مزيت اليومانوخن ومريخ الخيوخن مخبي جوتر دقيقة وطلع دقيقة همزمتها باست آشور ليلة خمندي هالسناي قامو سبب ديلايات آشور هدخي ورابا وصباي وشابيرة قد كل خمنة مصيا بيشا هوجيتا أخملو أبريشا يعني أخشي إتوا برسدي قد تفيقنوا بأخونا آشور جو أطرابريخ ضد نهرين ينجو واشنطن دي سي تايوز بيات بريشة ينلخا جو شيكاغو إيمان آتيوا هما شتبخب وضعله ومديد قد أنا خزيلي جو بات الدية أنا خزيلي جو برسوب الدية إيوا إيتيقن مشيخيتا إيوا إيتيقن أخلق شابرتها قد إتوالي ناجبوت الدية وهن رياشيات طاو باسيم الدية آشور لا شك بليخلي جو باوا أمتنايا وبجو باوا ناشايا إن أدرانايا إنا بشرابا بيشوديا جو باوا ناشايا دي قد إيوام دبرانت أيد سوسايتي جو إراق وتاما بليخلي بشن بخشاوت الدي ومديد قد مودلا قد آشور أزل وقابلني المشتعلانوتا اد ايد سوسايتي جو إراق إيوا من سبب إتوال إرياشتا ناشيتا إرياشتا طوتا وباسمتا اد قد كانوا متوالا بشوب الداني سنيقة ومليصة وجنجرة ومرية وكبينة وصية مادخ يازل وإيكت أويا برست قد تقتقوى خطرة قد ما سوى خهيرتا قاني وقناش سنيقة أدبنونة أمتي ينخينا أموات الطايبة جو أطردت نهر لي مخبل أعزل وأعود وعلي أمو سبب إرايشوا بماردية وخاطر جميعا لي ماسي ومالي والو كل سنيقوياته إنا مدري ليك عليوا أب إن ماسي وخسامة سورة من دن سنيقوياته مالي والو وآها يخزنوا على أنا جو برسو بدية كما مارخميوا كما يتخمنوا بوتسنيقة بوتموليس مادخ جنيلة ألدو باوا بشرابو خشاب تدي ومن دي خينا قد باين أمرني أنا رابي من شمية باست بيتوتة آشور باست بابا يمة آشور باست ساونة آشور كما جبار وكشير وينا قهيمانوتي مشيخيتا طيتت مدن خط آتوراي وكما وينا مرقيرت الهيايوتي أمتانيتا آتوريتا شميون رابا تشئيات الشعبير لباين هاجنون أخشي باين أمرينا إن آشور سرغون اسخريا وإلى آشور سرغون اسخريا بيش لم يقرأ من كل آتوراي ولا آتوراي مدن خاي وما أرواي من سبب بيشة ودرودا جو درگشتا اتخدا كلبت خاتخا ماره هيمانوتا بمارن إيشم شيخة ومارقيرت قهيايوتو أمتانيتا آتوريتا تاما شقل قالب آشور تاما قنيل قجانو ومنديت قد ويل خارتا آشور سرغون اسخريا بيشواديا مرابا ناشي إيكت آزيتونوا آشور خازيتونوا التاما مندي أصلايا وإسايا قد شقل جو كلبت أمردوتا بيتيتا أمردوتا مشيخيتا أمردوتا أمتانيتا خرطة جو مازلت تخيو بنسيانو جو بالخنانة أمتناية وناشاية بقريتو جو مدرشياتي وجو بتصوبة اللاية بوش مزجدلي الدا أترا إتيقونايا اتجاني بداها إيمانت خبرة بلطلة اتشوناية آشور آتوراي ولا آتوراي يطان ولا يطان قد شمينهم بوت آشور اتمجن بشلون بخشة قامو سبب كلن تولقلن خاخورا خاخونا شاريرا وانا بخشاوي من ايتت مدن خط آتوراي وامتا آتوريتا تولقلا خبرسوبا قد بدأتت ماسيوة آويوة خمهديانا رابا مرم أبدانوتا جو امتا آتوريتا قمودي سبب إتوال اندلياتي اتمهديانوتا سبب لي أود وخيلة قد ناشئاتي بارو إلا بلخانو شاريرا كما أود وقد ناشئاتي وبارو أن دلياتي إيوا شابير قد خدنا ماسي وشاقل ومشتألانوتا جو باوا امتنايا جو باوا ناشايا بداها خسرا من خبالة إنا مدو بالخينا قالك يطخ أخ مشيخاي أخ مهمنا بمارن إيشو مشيخا قد ألها بابت رخميلي أخ رزاي كومتها وخشاويني تلاشيك خينا بقيميني بشوفة آشور وبشقليني إلداها مشتالانوتا ومكمليني الدو بالخانة شابيرة الدية قبني أمتن آتوريتها وقخينا الدين سنيقة اليس بداها بخوتاما ببارم ودايا أخي تقي كله خن مريا آلها مني خل روخة آشور ولي شوخنها وباسيمة وتشيبو قدانت قد قمنوا بدا واجبوتها وأني فيديو جموينا التخارت آشور قد أديني خا فيديو بوش قريان خا كليب دي لنايا مريا بارخ لو خن مريا منت من كله
قام أينن بريشة مجولبا ليل بريشة كما جاتن لاقت مقروة الخبرانة جت خبرانة رخشن تليقنا من دنيا قومت روخو خويا بشلامة طاولخ قاتوخ بتمكملخ المزلتوخ وبتشلشخ كل مصايوتا الطمومة أو خلمخ شابيرة إن هاوي بلن خبردا شابيرة خكت جاهد آتت وجو خيالا بتخاوخوا يخاجنت مليتا من ورده.
My name is Juliana Taimarazi, the founding president of Iraqi Christian Relief Council. On April 9th, 2021, I was awakened by a phone call from my friend Eileen Ishaq in Lebanon. I missed her call. When I opened my phone, I found a message from Janos, Ashur Sargon's brother, who had written, "I'm sorry to tell you that my beloved brother Ashur is no longer with us." I will never be able to express adequately the colossal pain that I felt in my soul. The news of his passing sent a shockwave throughout our universe. Heaven and earth shook, and life, as we had noted, had been transformed forever. We all tried to make sense of what had just happened, young and old, Assyrian and non-Assyrian, for the Ashur that we all knew and loved was no more. How do you summarize a life or a friendship? How do you summarize the impact of a man larger than life, a gentle giant who to many was a colleague, a friend, a brother? How do you eloquently present the life of a loving husband, a caring father, a wonderful son? How do you express all of this in just a few minutes? It is truly impossible. However, on the day of Ashur's passing, I promised to give him a farewell befitting a king. And this is what you are watching today, a tribute to a man who dedicated his whole life to the least of these, to humanity, to Assyria. Elie Wiesel wrote, "Forgetfulness leads to exile, memory to redemption." With this global tribute, which includes over 100 participants, spans over 4 continents, presented to you in 3 languages, completed by a very large and dedicated team, we honor the life of a man whose name, Ashur Sargon Eskrya, will reverberate throughout the generations to come. We dedicate this to Ashur's family and to you who loved him. Ashur was born on August 19, 1974, in Nineveh, Mosul, Iraq, to his excellent parents. He was the firstborn. He was loved and adored by many, especially by his grandmother Shamira, and he loved her just the same. I witnessed that love when, in our visit to Mosul in January of 2018, we found him searching through an Assyrian cemetery which had been destroyed by ISIS. He was searching through the rubble for Shamiram's gravestone, but to his dismay, he was unable to find it. The entire cemetery had been turned upside down by ISIS. His story, though, does not really begin in 1974, because his story is wrapped up with a much larger and much older account. It is a part of his beloved Assyrian history.
For almost 2,000 years, Assyria was among the most important and powerful of the nations of ancient Mesopotamia. Its history begins roughly 2,500 years before the coming of Christ, in the city of Ashur on the western bank of the Tigris River, a city that later became the spiritual and religious capital of the old Assyrian Empire. Through a succession of dynasties, Assyrians ruled not only through the Old, but also through the Middle Assyrian and finally the Neo-Assyrian Empire associated in the Bible with such names as Sennacherib, Tiglath-Pileser III, and Shalmaneser V. It was during the latter's reign, around 700 BC, that Nineveh became the capital of Assyria and the largest city in the world with a population of over 150,000. It was to this great city that the prophet Jonah came to preach his message of repentance, foreshadowing the conversion of the Assyrians to the Jewish Messiah, Jesus Christ, in the 1st century AD. Following the fall of Nineveh to the Babylonians in 612 BC, Imperial Assyria passed into history. But the Assyrian culture did not, as did so many other ancient Middle Eastern cultures. Being a minority religion, Assyrian Christians soon found themselves persecuted for their faith, the first of many such persecutions by the Persians, the early Islamic conquerors, the Mongols, the Turks, and the Kurds. Despite persecution, the Church of the East, an institution which during the early centuries of Christianity was multi-ethnic along with the Syriac Orthodox Church, was the counterpart to the churches of the more Western empires, Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. They became the leader of missionary efforts among Christians, bringing the faith to India, Central Asia, China, Southeast Asia, and even Japan. At one point in the Middle Ages, the Church of the East was the largest by geographical region covered. Persecution, however, took its toll, and the invasions of China, Central Asia, India, and the Middle East, and the wholesale slaughter of Christians by the now Muslim Mongols, reduced the Church to a shadow of its former self. This process, though slower and with less widespread bloodshed, continued under the Ottoman Turks. Then came World War I. During the Great War, the Ottomans fought the Allies, particularly the Russians and the British, to a stalemate. Even as the Turks dealt with foreign enemies, they decided to embark on a massacre of unprecedented proportions. Beginning in the 1890s and drastically accelerating in the summer of 1915, and running through the end of the war and even following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, more than 1.5 million Armenians, 750,000 Greeks, and 2/3 of Assyrians were murdered by their Turkish rulers and their Kurdish allies in what Assyrians call the Sefo, or sword. This settling of old scores with blood enemies by the Turks and the Kurds led the lawyer Raphael Lemkin to coin the word genocide, referring to the crime of extermination of an entire ethnic or racial group. The attempt to destroy these Christian peoples made a lasting impression on Adolf Hitler, whose Holocaust of the Jews was based on the earlier actions of the Turks and Kurds. Such was the abuse of the Assyrians that when the British formed a military unit called the Iraqi levies to fight the Ottomans, it eventually became dominated by Assyrians and was renowned for fighting skills and tenacity that were frequently compared to the Nepalese Gurkhas. Sadly, once Iraq gained its independence from Britain in 1932, its army decided to follow in the footsteps of their former Ottoman rulers. In August 1933, the Iraqi army and their proxy militia, the Kurds, began destroying Assyrian villages in northern Iraq, culminating in the massacre at Sameleh. Children were bayoneted, women were raped and murdered, men were decapitated, and priests were burned with their Bibles. To this day, this pogrom is commemorated on August 7th as Assyrian Martyrs' Day. Further incidents of persecution later in the century, including attempts at Arabizing and Kurdifying the remaining Assyrians, continued to plague the nation up through the regime of Saddam Hussein, whose tyrannous rule inspired our hero, Ashur, to enter politics to try to win a measure of freedom for his people.
The mountainous Barwar, famous for its apples and honey, a region adored by all Assyrians, the subject of countless poems and songs, is where Ashur's ancestors come from. Over time, a region which was the home to Assyrians slowly fell in hands of the Kurds, whose mission was to expand their territory. But the Kurds were not alone. Saddam Hussein and his Ba'athist regime, as a part of the Anfal campaign, destroyed countless of Assyrian villages, causing a mass exodus from the ancestral lands. Let us listen to Ashur tell the story of his beloved Barwar.
Here we are in the village of Ennune, Kanimasa in Kurdish, as they spelling it. It was destroyed in 1987, and here was the old village. All was one roof. As they mentioned that they used to live all together before, because they trying to keep protect themselves. So that was the main reason to be one roof. And there was many families living there. I think there was more than 60 families when this village was established all together. Of course, there was each family, including maybe 10, 12 person at that time, the average for each family was. And later, after maybe 1932, 31, they starting to build some homes everywhere. And of course, most of those homes were destroyed. Only I think except one home was remained, because the Iraqis army at that time used it as a base for them, and they used to destroy all the agriculture, all the apples everywhere, everything here. After 1991, people they started to return back here, but unfortunately, most of our people, because the situation is not secure after 1991 even. Until this moment, most of them they are immigrated and they're living in outside the country, in Europe, in America, Canada, Australia. The good thing is that the connection is continue between our people everywhere, and they used to come to the village, especially in summer. They celebrate here and in Western the day of Find the Cross in 13 of September. Everywhere that time is for the celebration for the village church.
Why is it important?
Marsawa and Cross is the famous or the church of the Ennune. So everywhere they celebrate for Marsawa, the doctors Marsawa. And everywhere around the world they remember that day. People from different villages in Barwari, we have here I believe more than 33 villages, Assyrian Christian, they coming to celebrate with Ennune village because of that day.
نشرة خومة ملكات قطيرة تخلن قلبانوخ برخين لتياري تخلن قلبانوخ برخين لتياري برقين نعمتي.
One of the most notable figures in the Assyrian history is Zechariah, Ashur's grandfather, who was a Mukhtar, the leader of the village of An-Nuna, a strategic place for all inhabitants of the district in Bawar. Zechariah, who was born in 1896, quickly became known as a courageous Assyrian who was loved even by the Kurds, but was hated by power mongers who viewed him as a threat. Iskhariya was assassinated in 1946 by the enemy, but in his short life he left a lasting legacy, one which Ashur Sargon took very seriously. One of Zechariah's major accomplishments was the recruitment of a large army unit to fight alongside Aga Petroius in Urmia. Aga Petroius of Baz was a notable Assyrian general who led a large Assyrian army against the Kurds and Turks during the Assyrian, Armenian, and Greek genocide. Zechariah fought fiercely on the front lines, defending Assyrian villages and towns. Later, he joined the Assyrian levies, and his courage and command of 3 languages, Assyrian, Arabic, and English, the British Army leadership promoted him to a 1-star general in the levies.
The Iskhariya family has always been known as the fiercest defender of Assyrian rights.
Ashur's youngest uncle was a known member of the opposition group who stood against the Ba'ath Party oppression against Assyrian nationalism. Saddam Hussein's regime released an order for his execution, and this caused him to flee the country. However, as a form of punishment in 1984, Ashur's father, along with his 3 other brothers, were imprisoned under the harshest of circumstances for over 2 years. Witnessing all of this caused Ashur to pledge his life to the Assyrian cause. In Mosul, he began the road to his higher education, attending a 2-year technical institute and receiving a diploma with a specialization in surveying at the Technical Institute in Mosul in 1994. He moved to Baghdad to continue his education in engineering, and Ashur received his Bachelor of Civil Engineering from the University of Technology in Baghdad in 2002. During this time, as Saddam Hussein's Arabization of all minorities was in full swing, Ashur became very active in promoting Assyrian idealism and nationalism. In Mosul, he started to secretly, and at the risk of his own life, distribute Bara, a publication which nurtured Assyrianism. At the Baghdad University, he met the love of his life, Rosina, who later became his devoted wife. During one of their first encounters, he secretly gave her a copy of Bara, and this is when Rosina knew she had fallen in love with a man whose life would be devoted to the Assyrian nationalism. They became engaged in a beautiful ceremony in Baghdad, and later they began their married life in Mosul. Their 3 beautiful children, Shamiram, Berta, and Sanhiru, were all born in Dohuk after the young couple were forced to flee Mosul in 2005. Later, in 2015, he also completed his education with a Master of Civil Engineering from Gaziantep University in Turkey.
In 2003, the coalition of nations led by the United States invaded Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein. Along with most non-Sunni Muslim Iraqis, the Assyrians celebrated the prospect of freedom and democracy. Their hopes were dashed, however, as they were caught in the middle of the struggle that developed between the invading forces, jihadists led by Al-Qaeda, and other militias. During this time, Ashur had become a known figure as an Assyrian activist. On a sunny day in 2005, as the sectarian war was raging on, Ashur had been in a meeting at the Assyrian Democratic Movement's office. As he left the headquarters in Mosul, his car came under attack by the jihadists who had wanted to stop him from his activities as an Assyrian Christian. He survived countless bullets and chose to go to another city, Bashika, and take refuge there. Knowing his life was now in danger, he decided to move his family to Dahuk. This is where he started building a new life as an engineer, and also joined the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq as its vice president. In 2010, he was promoted and became the president of the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq, and as the head of this reputable organization and an important figure in the Assyrian Democratic Movement, Ashur became a key voice in both the Kurdistan regional government and the Iraqi central government in advocating for protection and provision for his people, as well as for a form of autonomy for the Nineveh Plains. For his efforts, the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2016.
On June 10, 2014, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria entered Mosul. They marked the Christian homes with the Arabic letter N, which represents Christians following Jesus of Nazareth as Nazarenes. Those who had still been living in those homes and had not escaped prior to ISIS's entry were given 3 options: to convert to Islam, to pay the jizya, which is a tax paid by non-Muslims during war, or to leave. If they were blessed, they were able to escape. Many were not able to. Many lost their lives. Many Christian women were taken into slavery. These Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Syriacs escaped to the northern part of Iraq, where Ashur had been living, in Nohadra, Duhok. He used his skills as a civil engineer and organized to bring relief to tens and thousands of Christians, Yazidis, and others who had escaped the wrath of ISIS. He was the president of the Assyrian Aid Society, and he carried the entire burden on his shoulders. His compassion for those in need was boundless, and no one of any religion, language, economic class, or ethnic background was ever excluded. Whether building infrastructure, providing necessities to families, or finding shelter for the homeless, for the displaced, Ashur was a man whose love for others was displayed in everything he did.
شمي سهيلة رزق بطرس خيتن بوشيس وعالم نخلة رابي آشور عوالم هير اللي بدرمنانة ومبزوزة بكل من دي حتى مواد لأن مقصرة منن وإن شاء الله يعني أي باردية هاو هم أخرابي آشور سباي قناشة كل عن مهير الليل ليلة شويقة خاء تليل مهير الليل يعني دكت دي يعني موهدي رابة خسارة وقالا كلا إنه آوى مهيروا فقيرة مهيروا كنت محتاج بيخ خرابي آشور دان أي آوى من نخلة إنه آوى رابق مهيرا بيخ إن آتوا بشوك دي هاو أخرابي آشور راب سباي يعني مهيرانة قناشة مهير خاز وضع دين إحنا كلن وشي مخرابة لا بس من عائلة ديو خيشيلة منن خيشيلة رابي آشور
شلون لخا كل قناشة من غازي لو فيديو أنا شمي منها نيسان توما من تل السقف حاليا قرية ساكن تيوغو قرية جنبور من دي قمايا آلام النخلة رابي آشور قوة خبرها مأساوي جدا وبالذات أخونا آشور وأخونا خدوم قا كل مثواتا فأخني يعني مفجئ لندوه خبرة محزن لأن الوضع القمثرة بإشراف كاون كلجنة الجمعية مهيورا من ناحية الأرزاق مهيورا من ناحية المساعدات الأدوية مهيورا من ناحية مندي مهيورا مرضى مساعدات مادية فأخني أدي حاليا أخو ويرب قد مراحل مرحلة وضع تعيس جدا جدا لأن أخونا آشير خشلة دكتور ملكوثة فدي حاليا أخني وضعا الحالي بعد رحيل أخونا آشور بيثير رابع للمثواثة ديا وخصوصا أخني دا حاليا بوضع كورونا ووضع دي القعيهاش اللي قاو دي بعد أخونا آشور خشلة رابع يسلق لن ووضعا يشلق إلى أسوأ وأخني طلبوا من مريا وشكر خلو إنه آذ دوكا خبرنا شغا كامل أي مسيرة دي وأخني ما تنلوخ المثل الذي مثل أخونا آشور أو كشجرة مغروسة عند جداول المياه التي تعطي ثمارها بأوانها أو دائما ترى ديوة بثيخة ككل برنامج محتاج سنيق من ديانة فآون دائما كثمرة آول سنيقة ليود من دي كل مثواث دي لموتين الأطرديا وخني يا ريت مصالح من أجل أي إدارة وأي كل من دي اللي بقدم لهم من ناحية المساعدات أنا ناشئ شكرك لي من أعماق اللبن وأنا ممنون.
من بابا وقلونا وروخة قدشا خانها خيا وشاريرا آمين. من جيبت قد يشوثي مرأة يتريانا كاثوليكا بطريركا شجولي وخ أيا همزمتا تخشى يقوثا خبرت شوناية أخونا آشور سرقون إسخريا دبرانا تشيطت وذرانا أثرايا جو باوت عراق خبرة مفشمانة لرابا إنا هويا إلى بمريا آلها سبب آشور إيوي وخا فلاخة كشيرة عوذة طاوة خبق كل خبرنا شاب في خلبكمهم نوثة بكل كشيروثة جو خقد مهيرتد ناشي مهموني ويخ قد بالخاني دي لأزل بطيلوثة سبب مارني شمشيخة بمانا لي إن كاسد 100 طاريري لتالق حقي بس كما بالزودة أو برناشات اللي دويخلق يعني دي اللي حماشة بليخة بتخاطر مهيرتت ناشي دي مهيرتت بني أمتي دي مريا آلها باليلة اللي دي مثل هيوي قتاوي اختلي بمانا مارني شمشيخة دايخقلات يولا أطنياثة أمة وإشتي وطلاثة مريا آلها من يخذي ومريا آلها سانت لبا تشيتت عذرانة أثراي باوت عراق وكل خزماني دي وناشي دي البت أخنا شريكي وحموخن وخشوخن وهماشا طلبخ من مريا آلها قد يولي نياخو بسامة أخنا لخق أستراليا متخلوة لنقرازة قديشة وسيتد أمرة مرزي طوانا ويذوالا طمتا أو روخي دي مريا آلها مشبخ بركاثي عدد كلن ومريا آلها متولي من اليمين دي ومكوثي شميانيثا آمين.
I have just heard the very sad news of the death of our friend Ashur Sargon Eskrya, who has been a tireless and a courageous defender of human rights for all minorities discriminated against in their own countries, especially Christians in Iraq. The Holy Bible reminds us, "For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the one that is to come." Letter to the Hebrews 13:14. Please send my sincere condolences to Ashur's wife and children, along with the assurance of my prayers for the repose of his soul. Alaha Manichle. Ignatius Yusuf III Yonan, Patriarch of Antioch for Syriac Catholics.
طشمت يورتا قبلا خبر مبشمانة شنايد مناخا آشور سريون إسخريا وبشناية موري الخشة جلبواتي داني ناشد يطيوة المناخة آشور من سبب توية خناشة ماري ديلايات طاوي وملية ومن خبة وطنانة وبسيموتا وكشيروتا يبلخانا أمتنايا وناشايا أنا برصو بايد كي يطنوا لآشور من قربة سبب دوية لبلن خا يصورة تخوراوتا وهم شائمة تخيشة من الجربية عراق تفيقه بغداد وخزين قد آشور إيوه وخناشا مارت إقارة ملية ومن خبة قتولي ناشي هم شا يخشى عالفاته إيوه بسيمة وصحبته رب بسمته ماري جو كتابة إفنجاليون من طنياته بدي يطيتون كل برناشا من طنياته بد باجدية لا أخشي من همزمانه إلا آي همزمنت همزم لبرناشا وتهمم بيو جارك ميشمنا جو خيوته آشور ويلي أو برناشا تهمشا مجشمنا لي أو من ديتهم منا لبيه لتلن شوق من اتأمر غداها نزبت قد ألاها من يخلم ناخذ آشور ومتو سامي عم كيني وزديقي جمل كوتة شمية وساند لبواتت ابني باتوتت كل بتت أخنواتت خطواتي وكل يعني ناشد يطيب على الآشور ألاها من يخلي وياو الخي قبني بيتوتي وقاكل خناشة
ممكن هويا برناشة اللي خازة آني خبرانة تاويخ شيخة قدم باشق لويا آشور ومصياثة مناخة لويا آشور إنا ما صد أمر لويا آشور إيوة خامن داني قورة يتوالوا لبرابة قورة ومرخمانة مقروة نخا هيرتها جو خقلت بالخانة ناشاية قا إسرايد ألبت ناشي من بنون وبنات أمتن سنيقة وقهولتها لبسيمة وبريشايد ناشد دشتت ننوي بعدانت ثيثة داعش تري ألبة وأربسر لوي آشور إيوة خا قورة مارت هونا صليلة وتخمنياثة أمتناية شاريرة الخانة لويا آشور قمتخد دن إسريشنة قربة دن إسريشنة خراي مغدادة إيوة خاطوسة اتخا برصوفة مهمنا بأمته بهاقويات أمته أعطوريتا وإيتوتو الأرة قو أثرد بث نهر أسيري أثرد آطر كل خيلة مخيالة قبض خاطر نصيخوث أمته ومطيع الهاقوياتو شريرة قو أثرة أنا برصوبا إيد بليخن قامت خد قربة أسريشن من لويا آشور قو شركة شوبانة وبريشا إيد أخاها دامت باقودوتة تزوعة ديمقراطايا أثرايا وهدامت مكتوى سياساية تزوعة طوسة شبيرة شويقة لويا آشور قو تشعيثة دية طول لويا آشور طول لويا آشور أمينا عيد بالتخرخلة أخا قورة مردة أخا زوعايا أخا قروتانا قبض خاطر أمته عطوريتها خوش بشلامة لويا آشور وتخارب وتبيشي هماشا بخايا بين عثل
قوت خارد أربي ومانة الشونايا تخورا ولوين كشيرة طنانا آشور سرقون هل بد بتخاري وخ أني داناته بماريروثا بأسقوثا من سبب أهلوية طنانا كشيرة خورة شغل خسبقيا جو خيوثا هل بد آشور سرقون إتوال رابا من ديانة بريشة أخبر صوبا بريشة أخرنيا أمتنايا بريشة أخا برناشا مغبانا قصبوثا أمتنيثا آشوريثا المتخدني ترأسرشن بلغنا المخذادة جو قغل بريشة إذ جو قغل أمتنايا قغل بقلوطيقايا جو رابا من شوبانت ودنا خزوقيا مخذادة جو روسيا وجو أمريكا يونايتد نيشن قد بقطي بناشديا لويا آشور إتوالخا هيمانوثا إيوا ودميث الدو مبوعة دمية دنوايلة من أرعد آشور تخمنتت آشور سرقون إيوا أو مبوعة دنوايلة من عمقد أرعد بريا وغاوة خبق أرعي مرويث دي أخدني مية قدني خقلانة هما شيوة رنية تخمنياثا خوباطي كشيروياثا بي بالخانة أمتنايا إتوا لهيمانوثا قد أخنا نقرق خيخ هاولا كيانا الجانن قرق خيخ بيجانن مدبرخ جانن بيجانن خامخ ونطرخ الإيثوثا من سبب أخنا إيوخ أمتا بش أتقتا وبش شرشيثا وبش خشيغ وقت حكما جان لا حكمي للنخراية هماشا نيش دي وبالخانة دي إلى قصويانا خيرت أمتن إدهاو مطيرة لو ياشر إلى خمبوعة رنية إلى خمبوعة تخمنياثة إلى خمبوعة الدوراشة قا أمتن قاونا شو خور مرامل روخت لو ياشر رنيو تخمنياثو خوروثو هاوخ أميناية قد لبيشي منشي وهاوخ أميناية قد ماسخ تممخ الدو رنيا الدو كوشار الدي هيمانوثا أمتنيثا وصرتن بأثرا بخبا إيوخا من دني ناشت لقد مصبط أخنا إيوخ أمتا شرشيثك ودنيا ورادخ إيوخا من دني فلاخة كشيرة ملوءة هوبركية دشتت ننوي وتعرصت خيلوات امبيو شركة رنيا أمتناية اكمدمت خرخلي لي ماسخ قو داها فيديو مدرب أمرشوخة ورمراما هماشا إيود قو لبواثن إيود قو رنيا إيود قو تخمنتن إيود أمن أوبن إيود شنيا من داها دنيا وشويقة خا سبقيا قورة وخيوثا أخلوية وأخوراواثا.
السيد آشور سرغون كان أخ وصديق عزيز وزميل في الهندسة والعمل السياسي حيث كنا في هيئة واحدة داخل الحزب لأكثر من 8 سنوات، وبالطبع معرفتي به كانت قبل ذلك. حزني لخسارة آشور سرغون لم تكن فقط للأسباب التي ذكرتها، حزني أعمق وأكبر بكثير، فقد فقدنا شخصا كان يتمتع بشخصية قيادية قوية ومدافعا غيورا وشرسا عن حقوق أمتنا الآشورية وعن حقوق المظلومين والمضطهدين والمهجرين في العراق. حلم وعمل من أجل أن يعترف بأمتنا الآشورية كشعب أصلي في العراق والعالم، وأن تعود حقوقنا المغتصبة. حلمنا وعملنا سوية لكي يكون لأمتنا خصوصية في إدارة نفسها بنفسها على أرض الآباء والأجداد، بعيدا عن هيمنة الشعوب العقائدية التي تشاركنا الوطن والتي تتبع أيديولوجيات دينية تختلف عنا، وبسبب ذلك عانينا المذابح والإبادة الجماعية في مناسبات عديدة من التاريخ. سيظل آشور سرغون حاضرا في فكري وآرائي، ومن أجل أن تتحقق أحلام وطموحات آشور سرغون علينا أن نؤمن بأنفسنا، وأن نؤمن بأن أمتنا قادرة على إنجاب الكثير من آشور سرغون. الرحمة على روحك صديقي، والرب يحمي ويرعى ويمنح الصبر لزوجتك وبناتك وابنك سنحاريب ووالديك وأخوانك ورفاقك وكل من عرفك.
قد خارت أربي يومان الشناية لويا وخورا كشيرة آشور سرغون تبقتي قامة من لويا آشور إيوا اتصاب 4 يوم ديت التلكيبة باثر مبلتت سلطانة إيرر لويا آشور منشورة يتبقتن إيوا مخايا نشرة ورشمة زوقة عالقودان مذيت التلكيبة وزد خروثن وليوثن بريشايث باثر أن اتصا شنة خاراي جو بلخانن جو سعتا قنطرانيثة زوقة لويا آشور إيوا من لويا طنانة همنة بلخانة ومتناية وأبنا شاية رابك لياثة ومتناية وخباطة بلخلون مغذاذة خبت لويا آشور قا أمتي جو برستت قالت أمتن بورخاتا بريشة وبريشة إيث مثاثة درابة منطقة سياثة ناشاية وسياساية الأطرة وتفقتن بيه ودراشن قاهنيانة أمتن ورهادخ بالخانة يوم رمتت شوية سعتت أضرانا الشوية تي ولاية ورهادخ هيرتا قناشن جوداني داناثا وسنيقوثا بريشايث باثر عورت داعش جو مذيتة ننوي ومثواثة خابور لويا آشور سرغون أخورة ولويا هما شبت بائش جو تخارن وجو تخمنياتن بروخي شاررتا وبلخانة كشيرة.
السلام عليكم، أنا يوين بهيجي دعوت نيشو ناطر رازت خيادة نشي عطراية بخخ الشقورة باسومي وان ريشة بيثوثة مناخة أشهر إسخريا من برزوقة دية وبنونة وبابة ويمة وخنواثة دية ورهادخ كل هدامة وقروتانة زوعة ديمقراطية آتورايا قا كلها ملت أمتا آتوريتا مناخة أشهر إيوخا بلاخة كشيرة قروتانا دويخ اللقانة دية قابنونة ملت دية قملت دية أنا إيوانو قربة اللدية غزيث اللي كمل بليخة بقشيوثة ودويخ اللقانة دية قا بلخانة صبية ودخية أخنا أخويادة نشة إيوا سندانا كمتي وأخوا سنيقة وطليبة هيرتا من سعتة عدرانا إيوا سندانا منتي خرايا بدمران أخنا لي بايش منشية هماشا بايش نقو تخارتن قو تخمنياتن قو بالخانن طوسا قالن على من يخلي هاوي لسامة قو ملكوثة شمية هاوي تبسي مرابا.
شلام لوكن أنا إيوان ألم تبسيمة ناطر رازت خيادة يلوبي عليمة كلدو أطوراي
شوراي بخم رخلخون على منخل رابي آشور وهاوي قنورو برديسا دزوثا شق من إصورة بلخانة أمتنايا مناخت آشور إيوة برونة خالي أخنا خب سامدقان أخويادة يلوبي اتوال الرابة خوباطة صيرة بسيتة أدرانا أو بهيارتة سيتة أدرانا إنا مناخت آشور إيوة هماشا سندانا قمايا لا أخشيقا شوت آسديا إناقا كل بنونة أمتن وإتوالن هيوي قد مناخت آشور صوتت أمتديا منطيلة الضرغة الله إن ألتت باشمت ويلا قد مشونيلة من خي زونانايا الخي أبديناي وأوا إيوا خسرانا رابا قورا لا أخشيقا بيثوثة دي إن أخشي دزوثقا كل ملة
كمت مهم زمخ بود لويا آشور سرقون إسخريا أخورا وأخلويا لما سخ ما متخلا أو بالخانة دي أو دوالة بسبب بالخانة دي أوي مغزى طونت دي لويا آشور إثوالخ خيل إثوالخ همنوثا بود من دي تملخ لأطرة آشور السوريا ستيت وهم ما شايف على خو بالدوم دي أجد بيش لي بقرايق وتكنولوجيا يونيفرسيتي وبغداد بيش لي أو شقال أو منطوي مدياني من دهوك الموصل بغداد من كثواني مخ قرياثة مخ سبرزونة بحرة كل مديانة تزوعة أنا مركلة منشورات قا تنظيمات موصل قا تنظيمات بغداد مخبرة مردنوا على قانا دي تثقيف الذاتي يطيب كثابة أنقاية كثابة تليقة كثابة أتيقة مخثخث والي أو والي كوبي لبس هذا إنه يبارس على ختم خانتي وبالخي قدوة شبيلة أو تمخبي والي أو خقلة أمتا ويا آشور لا يقوى وما لقوى
آشور إسخريا يواخا هدامة من نعمة يعني قدية أمتا كبليخة بشاربوثا طالصدوثا أمتانيثا انتيلة من خلال بوليتيقي يعني انتيلة من بالخانة ناشايا اديونا لبن حاكم يعني هنزمن التيقر بايوثا بثوا بيني وبين آشور وما تحاكم الآشور بلكي الشهادة دي جرحتها يعني مجروحة مريلة آشور ليوا بس خابر صوبا بلاخوا أرخا دوس ناجب اللي وخناشة كرييتف بالخانة أمتانا أمتن سنقت لأديو قد هاويلا توصل آشور تضماصي بالسودة داعي يعني باهوياثة هاويلو طالت زدقا أمتانا فأديو يوم خسرت آشور إلى خسرت رابا خيلنتا ليثيم عوضا بلكي ليلة كتخا بس خاير إنه اتلخ مشتقلانوثا إنما لازم يادي بمقول خطا الخلا وها مبدع وكرييتف بدايا بالخان آشور يوخام ناشي كرييتف بلكي خا جبارة وطورة من طورانة آشور قد هي دائما قال علويا دعوي بزدقة امتديا ان براي يعني قواي قو أخرى يعني حتى قلت كاسا يعني كل مؤسسة شتآسة دويرة لقوا آشور اللي بيخيلة بمكيكوثا وبعدالة وبيخيلة بخور خدوس لثوال أرخا جلطة فتهذا دخلت آشور إلى تشيثة الكل وأخني هماشا لازم تخلق له بحبه وبخا تصلى نخلى عزيمة قوية لأنه أون أخورة شريرة له هم هذا وناشا متنايا ومدافع لزدقة نعملية.
I met Ashur Sargon, or Bershi, as we called each other, in 2010. There was something special about him, even though I did not know him or know it at the time. We immediately connected. Perhaps it was because we are both named Ashur, or perhaps because we're both engineers. I don't know. I normally called him when I had a concern or there was an issue that I needed his advice on. No matter how serious the issue, Barshi always found a way to lighten the discussion, and our conversation would turn into a pleasant bantering session. To you, Barshi, I say, you left us too soon and left a large void in our lives as well as in our hearts. Even though you are gone, your deeds and work will never be forgotten. We shall meet again, my friend.
When I first met Ashur, my initial thought was, wow, he's so approachable. And I thought our personalities clicked, but that was his personality. He was kind, he was gentle, and he had a very calming smile that put you at ease. And yet, when it came down to helping our people and getting our rights, he was absolutely fierce. In moments of frustration and trial, Ashur Eskrya lifted our spirits with his humor and determination, encouraging us to keep pushing and keep fighting. I feel him and that message right now. We will keep pushing, we will keep fighting, and we will always remember Ashur Sargon Eskrya.
In one's life, you encounter guidance and wisdom that shape what you become. These values can come from family, faith, colleagues, and sometimes mentors. Rabbi Ashur was that transformational mentor for the Assyrian Aid Society. He led the organization through the most tumultuous period of our nation as we faced genocide, mass exodus, and pandemic. Rabbi Ashur had this charismatic and humble nature that engaged with beneficiaries of all realms to understand their needs firsthand. Despite his never-ending engagement with global organizations, he was always accessible to anyone, be it global leaders or individual volunteers. His vision was for Assyrians to thrive in their ancestral lands. He told me not too long ago, we will focus on development and job creation so our people have a viable source of income and remain in the homeland. Rabbi, we will fulfill your vision. We will mourn today, but draw from your strength and courage for tomorrow.
I vividly remember how eager he was to meet with the Assyrian community here in the diaspora, and everyone was so drawn to his energy and his vision for advancing Assyrians into the future, and we saw that daily through his passion and his hard work. And that is why it was so important for him to stay connected with his community and to share the work of the Assyrian Aid Society with them every step of the way. Because for him, action spoke louder than words. And that's what set him apart. And that's what enabled him to build long-lasting friendships across the world. His abilities as a leader were numerous, but aside from his professional responsibilities, at his core, he was a man full of compassion and full of humanity. Not everyone can do that and do it with such humility. So a sincere thank you to his parents and to his family for raising such a great human being and then sharing him with the rest of the world. Our dearest Rabbi Ashur, thank you for your dedication and thank you for your leadership. We are forever in your debt for the legacy you leave behind, for those of us who have been so inspired by you, and we are committed to continue on the path you have led.
When we heard the devastated news of his departure, the tears started flowing, the mouths were silenced, and emotions were overwhelming. God chose Ashur during the darkest hours of our wounded nation to be a flickering light of hope. Lord burdened him with the responsibility of helping a nation, but that he has proven to be steadfast to their faith and ethnicity. He shined like a star, became a hope for the hopeless, became a leader who earned everyone's respect. He stood tall in all adversaries and negotiations with utmost professionalism. He helped the displaced, he fed the hungry, he sheltered the needy, he challenged the authorities. He sat on the same table as the leaders of the world to find a way of salvation. For all of that, he earned a well-deserved nomination for Nobel Peace Prize. His warm smiles, his helping hands, his guidance, his wealth of knowledge, and his flickering light of hope will be tremendously missed.
Shalom Aleichem. I met Rabbi Ashur for the first time back in 2013 in one of his visits to the US. From the moment that I met Rabbi Ashur, I fell in love with his level of energy, his compassion, and his love for Assyrian people, for us. One character of his that struck me the most was that he never lost hope. In the darkest moments that our nation has faced and is still facing, Rabbi Ashur stayed optimistic, hopeful, and he never gave up.
لبة شميطة وخشانة بتخاري ون أغونستا جبارة آشور سرقون إسخريا قمشا وقلن جخا دانا تخوى رابة سنيقة اللدية سبب آشور من دي دانت شقل مش أنا موتت ايت سوسايتي ايوه هداما قلو سيتا قنطرونيت الدوعة ديمقراطية أتورايا شلوشيوا وبلاخيوا كل إيقارة وكل هيمانوثة وكل شاروتة قد هيرتد بنون وبناتت أمتن وأطرا خبيبة آشور اتوال خاتخمنتا الليتا بناتت متواتا ديا هيرتد أسكولاية هيرتد آروقة بريشايت بدانت رهيواية اختلي قبنون وبنات أمتن قو موصل وقو دشتت ننو شرديلي خسرانت آشور رابا قوري آشور ليل أختي بليخة قا نتا وهيرتا دنونت أمتن أخا عدرانا أخا هيرتا إينا أب سلوتا أمتنيتا قال أمتنايا قالت أمتن منطية بكل أطروات الدنيا رابا قاتت الأمريكا رابا قاتت زي السويسرلاند زي البرلمان الأوروبي بطلابة قد خازي كما ظلمية الأمتن بيتايا أنا بجاني وين مارت أقبل طلع ترمياتا آشور تيوويد لشرك ينجاوي شتريل بطل تسر خشلي أمدية وأم خاتن منى وخاتن شوشن وميقرنين بلاماسو اليونايتد نيشن أموات مخيدة سبب بيشي وقبلتا السيريان ايد سوسايتي قد شركاوة بخرزة ناشئ أصلايت أطرة أبزي طلب مني قد هونوا شركانا أم يقرأ فرانك وولف قد أسقيوا الأطرة تخازيوا شرارة مودي القومة قومتواتا ديا مودي القومة قدشتت ننوة مودي الظلمية الاتيرنونت أمتن هرهادخ تريال بوتشسر خاجة خيتا شركوالي بشيتا من آخوني آشور آلم نخلة وخشوالا من يقرأ ديفيد أولتن أو إلى لورد خامن لوردات لندن أوبا وزي تبقى كل إتاتت إتوالا كل أمرانت إتوالا كل قبت إتوالا برلمان كردستان كتاوي والنوت كتوي الرابة برتيل دير لندن كتوي الرابة بتزميتي لإتي الأطوراي أن ترمياتها شقلة دنيا نخراي لا اختي أطوراي بالضايلك مظلومية إت الأمتن آشور إن أنا بينهم زمن من آشور ميقرتا جوليانا بيالي صعدت سبب في الخنانت آشور بيالا يوماتا ناشقت كاتولي علاه ما نقل أغنستا آشور على يودك تنورا وفرديسا ودك ديها يخم قديشة وكينة بشامي وخ وريشت أمتنها وبسيمة سبب خسرانة قوريلا وبشمتا قرطيلا تالقتت هتخا أغنستا قدية أهول قائمتي لأمتن بوارا قاوة
On behalf of the Assyrian American National Federation, I would like to extend our condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Ashur Iskhariya. Ashur was a true leader, a builder of bridges, a man with so many friends around the world that he was always looking to see how he can help our people, how he can build friendships and relationships around the world as humanity would ask. He was truly a humanitarian. Ashur believed in so much, and he believed and he was committed and really did believe that we had a dream that could be a reality and building an Assyrian nation in our own ancestral homeland of Assyria. He was at the forefront. He was there on the ground working and leading the Assyrian Aid Society in Iraq and building a better Assyria. Anytime we had calls with Ashur, anytime we asked what's going on, Ashur would always be there regardless of the time difference and tell us what's happening, what are the projects, what are the projections, what do we need, what are the resources. Ashur was a leader. I cannot emphasize that enough. We wish we had so many more Ashurs, but I hope we will in the years to come. Again, I extend my condolences to the family and friends and colleagues of Ashur Sargon Eskrya.
مناخ رابي آشور سركون إسخريا خيود وي خالي قا أمتو بالخانو بشنة قا جسيت أدرانت إراق خاتج برانا وبدأ أنا رابا بالخانة خينة بلي خلي من شد آستي ولاية ومواتم خيدة قا هيرتدني أمتن اليوم Assyrian Foundation of America بيا مقروبة بسمت تريشة قا جلبتو جلبت الناخا رابي عاشور وقا جلو خرواتو وقا صيتو درانت العراق عودة وقبني أمتن جو أطرا وتيبل ألاها من يخلي هذا باسيمة ريشة جلن.
I have known Ashur for so many years. And once, when we had a meeting with Congressman Trent Franks here in Arizona, I was so impressed and truly surprised with Ashur's level of knowledge about the Assyrian situation in Iraq, his dedication and commitment in serving the Assyrian nation. Also, when at the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva back in 2015, we received every report that we have asked of him about the situation of the displaced Assyrians. He was always ready to provide any and all extensively written reports with details. And at every time that we had a meeting with members of Congress or any other officials, we've always talked to him first. That's why I called him Mr. Reports. He worked very hard in preparing reports that documented every incident that affected the Assyrian people in Iraq. The Assyrian nation has lost a true Assyrian patriot. You will be dearly missed. Rest in peace, my friend.
Shalom Aleichem Neumtich Qire. Auda Untanaya ile Agdo Aywa et Ate Pracha وكالة الأرقى بريستا وخرطة مصليلة مطرة الدائرة بريستا ومشتيلة قطعي أرقى مجينة ويوات أنتا هتخينا أودة أمتناية كشيرة وشاريرة تبليخينا قداها أمتا وإدميوما بتهمزمخ بقديموتا بت مناخا آشور سرغون اسخريا آشور سرغون اسخريا ليون نوخن خامدي بالتشعيتا ديو إينا أخت آنا ديون خزيو وأخت رابا من نوخن خزيو وإيوا خابر صوبا باروية تخمنياته باروية بلخانة خاته باروية خا دار خا جنريشن خاتا مليا من صورة وطنانا أمتنايا ومن دي بريشة خزية ومبت صيتة أدرانا أطورايات إلى سيرن أي سوسايتي إلى خا قشمة أمتنايا كمت عودة آتي وآزي إنا آها قشمة بيشانيلي من سبب إلى برية من روخة أمتا.
I had the pleasure of meeting Ashur during my last visit to northern Iraq in December 2019. Although it was relatively a short time, I was able to recognize Ashur's love and passion for his nation and heritage and his commitment to serving people from all ethnic and religious backgrounds. I was particularly impressed by his kindness, generosity, and organizational skills. The news of his passing came as a shock, and I would like to extend my deepest condolences to his family, friends, and colleagues. His passing is a big loss for all of us, but I have no doubt that Ashur's legacy will continue to live and inspire future generations for years to come. The retired Honorable Professor, the Lord Alton of Liverpool.
I was saddened when I heard of Ashur's death. When I got the email, I almost began to cry. I want to offer my sympathy to his family. Ashur was a critical person in the effort to help the Iraqi Christians. Ashur took me around when I visited Iraq, and I met with him many times when he came to Washington. I can remember being in villages with Ashur and how people gathered around him, and you could see how much they respect him, and he was highly respected here in Washington. Ashur was a giant. He had a very, very gentle giant. He was a man of great faith. He cared deeply for the Christians in Iraq. Not many people realize it, but as you all know, more biblical activity took place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than in Israel. I mean, Nasiriyah, Mosul, it's Nahum's tomb. There's so much, and so Ashur was sort of the face of what was taking place there, particularly when he would come to Washington. And I thank God for Ashur's life. And I just urge everyone who watches this to honor Ashur, to keep supporting the Christians in Iraq, to keep his memory alive, and to do everything we can to make sure 100 years from now there's a long tradition of Christians living in Iraq as there have been for many, many previous centuries. May God bless Ashur's family. Amen.
The Christians of Iraq have faced incredible hardship and violence for many years, even predating ISIS's genocide perpetrated against them. Now, as they try to rebuild a semblance of normalcy, they face new threats from Iranian and Turkish regional adventurism. During this time of persecution, a few leaders have risen to lead their community through the darkness. One such leader was Ashur Sargon Eskrya. From his position as president of the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq, he served the needs of his people who were initially displaced by ISIS and then worked to rebuild their towns and villages. His work also made him an international advocate. I was glad he joined us at the International Religious Freedom Ministerial held by the State Department in 2019. His loss is keenly felt by all who look for a better future for religious minorities living in Iraq and the Middle East. My warmest sympathy and prayers go to his family and colleagues. Sam Brownback, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom.
I am Nadine Mayenza, and I serve as a commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. It is with great sadness I pass on my condolences to the family of Ashur Sargon Eskrya and the entire Assyrian community. I had the privilege of spending time with Ashur last November while I was in Erbil. We had a real heart-to-heart about the current conditions in Iraq and especially in the Nineveh Plains, and how there was this narrow path forward for Assyrians and others to stay and build a future. While I came to that meeting with a different perspective on some minor things than he had, he was so kind and patient, even as he passionately made a case for me to see things differently. And of course I did. I really was so struck and moved by his generosity, both with his time as well as the way he treated others. I also appreciated him connecting me with his colleagues at the Assyrian Aid Society, whom I've had much affection and admiration for. The work you have all accomplished, along with the Iraqi Christian Relief Council, has made a real difference, not just for those in the Assyrian community, but for all who live in the area. I know we must continue to work towards that narrow path forward in Iraq, even if we can't imagine it is possible without Ashur's leadership. He has left an incredible legacy, inspired many, and there's no doubt that his significant work will continue to bear much fruit for years to come. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this important memorial tribute to his life.
International Christian Concern first met Assyrian Aid Society while on a joint field trip with Iraqi Christian Council. This trip was a very special time to be there, because it was not only Easter, but the Assyrian New Year. Assyrian Aid Society not only welcomed us into the full participation of these events, but Ashur specifically made sure that we had a full flavor of Assyrian life during these days of celebration. He was an ambassador for the Assyrian Christian cause, and we have enjoyed many years of partnership with the Assyrian Aid Society through projects that seek bring restoration from the brokenness Assyrians had experienced because of years of genocide. While Ashur brought ICC to Barwar to visit his family graves, we never thought that we would have to go back to visit Ashur's grave. His absence is felt deeply by everyone. He gave us so much of himself for the Assyrian cause, for human rights, religious freedom. The legacy he leaves behind is so great. He was a pioneer carving a path forward, which we must continue towards. A path towards human rights, of freedom of identity, freedom of conscience.
Ashur wasn't only a friend, he was a brother and a comrade, and he was a malfono. That's how we used to call each other. We spoke almost every day, for hours sometimes. We planned together, we traveled together, we dreamed together, and we had big hopes. His passing came as a big shock, but Ashur will never be forgotten, and we will miss you very, very much, my friend. Your legacy will continue to live for years to come, and will continue to inspire us and inspire future generations. You will never be forgotten, my friend Ashur. Rest in peace. We will continue, and see you soon, my brother.
Hi, my name is Chris Seipel, and I had the privilege of knowing and working with Ashur from 2014 to 2017 in the aftermath of the ISIS invasion all throughout northern Iraq. When I think of my brother, first I think about his laugh, this chuckle, before it would break out into full-on laughter, and it was a beautiful thing to behold as his eyes began to twinkle. I also remember what an astute listener and observer he was of the human condition. He sensed when things were out of pattern, out of whack, and was able to correct them. That's why he was so good with working with people. And he was a learner. If he didn't understand something and he wanted to know more, he asked questions. He was always asking questions. But what I remember most about Ashur is his love for his people and his love for his God. And because of both of those things, he worked so hard for all peoples, of people different than him, to improve their lives. And so my memory of him comes from the good book, comes from Isaiah 61, 3 and 4. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Ashur was an oak of righteousness. He was rebuilding the ruins. May we continue his work. I miss you and I love you, Ashur. Shlama, brother. Shlama.
You have taken this journey with us through this tribute. We together learned about the man, about the activist, the humanitarian, and the politician that Ashur was. But he would not have wanted us to part ways without we, the members of the board of ICRC, presenting you with a series of calls to action and invite you in a very real way, in a very concrete way, to get involved with the Assyrian cause.
1. Insulate the Nineveh Plains region from political tensions between the central government of Iraq and Baghdad and the Kurdistan regional government. Establish an international protection zone in the Nineveh Plains region with the support of the UN, the United States, and others to ensure Assyrian Christians and other minorities do not fall victim to genocide again. 2. Increase the proportion of Assyrian representatives in the Iraqi parliament to match the percentage of Assyrians in the Iraqi population prior to the Samele massacre in August 1933. Also include Assyrians in the Iraqi Ministry Council. Establish the Nineveh Plains province aligned with the central government of Iraq in accordance with the Iraqi constitution. 3. Increase the proportion of Assyrian members in the KRG parliament to 20% and acknowledge Assyrians as the second nation in the region. Also include Assyrian representatives in the government council, the parliament, and the presidential cabinet in positions like, but not limited to, head of parliament, deputy of ministers' council, and vice president.
Today, the Assyrians are confronted with a policy of Kurdification. This policy is to propagate Kurdish cultural values among non-Kurdish components in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. This policy is enforced from high levels of government to the local Kurdish media that perpetuates this process. Tangible and intangible Assyrian cultural heritage is propagated as Kurdish or Kurdistani Christian culture and heritage. This is deeply concerning, as such practices can amount to ethnic or cultural cleansing. Such policy is evident in major tourist areas throughout the Kurdistan region of Iraq, especially in the Erbil Citadel and the Khanis Archaeological Park, where clearly Assyrian heritage is rebranded as Kurdish. The international community, in particular human rights groups, government and non-government agencies, are urged to confront such policies and practices.
Put an end to all form of land grab cases. Adopt a serious plan to record all land grab cases since 1933 after Samele massacre. During the Kurdish Revolution in 1961, the Iraqi army destruction of Assyrian villages in 1975, and all the ongoing cases from 1991 until the present time. Also, allocate necessary budget, pass and enforce laws to solve these open cases.
Allocate special budget to rebuild the towns of the Nineveh Plains after the destruction caused by ISIS invasion. Provide all the necessary funds to rebuild the homes and properties of civilians. Establish long-term plan to rebuild infrastructure of the Nineveh Plains region. Encourage and assist economic growth in the region by investing in businesses and creating job opportunities to help the Assyrians thrive and rebuild their communities in their homeland.
Urge the Iraqi government to adopt an education system that instills and emphasizes values promoting acceptance of others, regardless of their race or religion. Also to include school materials to highlight the important role that the Assyrians, the indigenous people of Iraq, have played in building the civilization as we know it today. Alter the education system in the Kurdistan Regional Government, KRG, by removing any reference to all radical materials from textbooks. Include the history of the Assyrians, as well as the history of the whole region in a general form and from a neutral standpoint.
لدب شب خبرة موزة مخارة توما إخ لخمة خميمة إسلا أمرت لامومة مريم رخمة موزة وليمونة البانا سدر شتيثة إسايا وقيانوس ويمه من كاسي يم وقيانوس شويخا من صدخة أرعم ترسياني ميا مشطخة ميايا أمينايا من ميد ملوخة وبلغلي جغرافايا هانا مشطخة ميايا الأربعة قيانوسة ومن يانا من يم زعور عخارة دلياث دميد وقيانوس في شخشيتها ملخوث دميد يمة وقيانوس شو ماها بشقلية والميد يمة وقيانوس طعمة ملوخة علتة إلى خبرة دايوبة قومية أخ كلوريد وصوديوم دبايش ديعة بملخة ترساية وإلى خبرة ريشاية قوميد وقيانوسة طخسة شمشاية قاخو باطع ويرس نعلو خطو سال طخسة شمشاية كنشتا من قشمة بريتنايا كارخي قو أتيرا كارخي غدار بليطة قنطرونايا قارة شمشا بليطة إن قدتا ملهطنتا من هوبا هادي قرتا لهطنتا إثلا بتيوتا زايدة على 1,000,000 كيلومتر شمشا إلى قشمة بشقورة قو طخسة شمشايا إلى بشقرتا من كل قشمة بيشانة قو طخسة شمشايا كتلتا بشقرتا بشومو 5 قاهي.
Professor David Alan Patterson writes of the 20th century German Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, who believed that the word you can be used only with one's whole being. To speak with one's whole being, body and soul, is to say you. Ashur, we will now carry what you dreamed of. You have called forth from us a response, and we announce our responsibility to your mission for Assyria. We will make sure that our children know your name for generations to come. Your name will be reverberated through generations. This we announce today with body and soul. The final message I received from Ashur was on April 6th at 9:33 a.m. Chicago time. He wrote, Shlama, love you, Juliana. You are my real sister. The words I have spoken with you today have been the hardest I have ever had to utter. I had never thought that someday I would have to carry a message such as this. Maybe today we will send a quick message. We'll make a phone call to the ones we love to tell them how much we appreciate them and how much we cherish them. Next time we see a fellow advocate, maybe we can rise above our differences. Maybe we can see the common good, the common cause, a cause for Assyria. Let us rise for her. Let us rise for Assyria. And now my parting words. We must understand that Ashur lives within each of us. And it is only through me, through you, that his great mission can be accomplished.
قوماي لآها دورا قم الأقل خم لي من صورا مرد شريونا مزلتا آها برسد لا شق أورا ربي لبجرأة بصلتخ لدي أرآدي لا هصلتخ مزند سوري لا وخنورا خرل قامة ومقوي صورخ الترميات د آشور مكمل شق بصخة روخة من الله سغبر الشوبو وعودلة خارة مدخر الشمو بكل إيقارة.
I am honored to pay tribute to the extraordinary life of Ashur Sargon Eskrya. I met Ashur in 2017 in Washington, D.C., and I learned from him how the U.S. government was failing to effectively support the victims of ISIS's campaign of genocide against Christians in Nineveh Plain That first encounter was critical for me, for it gave me the proper grounding to understand the problems faced by these communities when the following year I was dispatched to Iraq to serve as Vice President Mike Pence's envoy to oversee his genocide recovery program. From September 2018 through today, Ashur and the Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq have been a direct partner and key advisor to the U.S. Agency for International Development, which was a new approach for USAID. It worked. Together, we launched many projects supporting school children, rebuilding local businesses, distributing food during COVID, and improving waste management practices. Could always count on Ashur to perform at the highest level of technical know-how and professional integrity. He had an uncanny ability to find solutions to complex problems. Based on our success in Nineveh Plain, today, USAID works more closely and collaboratively with persecuted communities all over the world. That was the kind of impact Ashur has made. With his passing, we have all lost an extraordinary man. I lost a friend. But the legacy that Ashur leaves behind, it's permanent. And through his passion for excellence, he's influenced the world. I know this is a very difficult moment for the Assyrian people, but let Ashur be that light for you that continues to shine. Please keep his fire burning. Ashur, my friend, God bless your beautiful soul. Thank you.
شيري مطيلة المرزة خيوتا بلا أختربي نطري الإيلنتا روخا دوخنتا شوقلا الإيتوتا برخلا أخيوني بشمي خيروتا نهرة مالاخي بشلا خرديتا برمرامة وشوخا خادوتا مطيتا آشور لي مايك إنهاوخ كلا آشور وش بشلا ملويا
The church triumphant has gained a saint, but the church on earth and the Assyrian people have lost a champion. To Ashur Eskrya and Assyrians everywhere, we say, Awacha Menekha. May God give him rest. Amen.
التخرونا اد أحن آشور سارغون إسخريا من ملبانا أبرم بار حنا يلدس آشور سارغون إسخريا بر أمتي جبارة تورايا دكتو خويا ببرديسة وبنهر على هايا دخران السعران غبهاوي بكل بأمتانايا مطولب أطير وتلبى بلخلق العمخ أطرانايا آيد زلخ بشلامة برمد وبارغ بديمي الكل دانا أحمد برانة سعتة عذرانا ويلخ كشيرة وهونانا مطلب إيدخ بريلي رمز طاوي بزونة دردوبيا ودعلصانا وحميمت لبخ مخزيلة كميوت أطيرة وحيلانا بني أمتي شقول مأحن آشر دمية حب شعريرة دمغزيل بمتلق نومايا مكيخو تلبى وبعواده أميرة آشر بايش طالن آتا بهيرة ودوباره أخجزن طيرة بالحدب آدي أرحى بتخرخ له أحن آشر أمانك الشيرة برأمتي رحيمة أطير تلبخ إيلد لبحمة سجيانو تتصعرانخ قدشتيلا مرابة وعليمة مطلدو بارخ طاوي بهاو تخيرة بلبة كل علمة عادي لما وهو تربتا دشوق له الآطر عمه زلتخ هوية بشينة وشلامة شمو خاوي بكتاود نوحامة قيمتخ أتيل شولامة امتخ بتخراله العالم بوسامة ما ندريش زلتخ هوية بشلامة